Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out. I'm Isabel Wang. Taiwan has become a topic that's often brought up on the global stage amid the growing tensions across the Taiwan Strait. However, one question keeps coming up. How close are we to a breaking point? Today, we're joined by J. Michael Call. He's a longtime Taipei-based policy analyst who recently wrote a book about the Taiwan Tinderbox, aiming to explore the long-time Taiwan-China relations and the cross-strait tensions. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Isabel. Nice to be here.
To start off, can you tell us a bit about why do you call this book, book title, the Taiwan Tinderbox?
Within that title, it includes it refers to all the elements being there in the Taiwan Strait there's potential for a major armed conflict that would have repercussions not only regionally but globally. So a tinderbox raises the specter of something major, which I argue in the book is not necessarily inevitable, but has the potential to become that.
What kind of spark that would concern you throughout the book by calling a tinderbox?
Well, certainly the most problematic and certainly troubling scenario would be major armed conflict in the Taiwan Strait. If at some point the leadership in Beijing concludes that the time is right, the opportunity is there to use military force to annex Taiwan. Not only the conflict itself would have catastrophic repercussions for the people here in Taiwan, but also the people in China. And there is certainly high potential as well for involvement by other countries, particularly United States, which remains Taiwan's main security guarantor. So if we started seeing involvement by United States, possibly Japan playing a role as well, you could very well see in the current geopolitical context that it has potential to become something even much greater than just a Taiwan Strait scenario.
You have been in Taiwan for a very long time, about 2 decades already, right? What has been the biggest change that you've seen over the past 20 years regarding cross-strait tensions?
I've been here for almost 21 years now. Someone who wrote or specialized about Taiwan used to feel very lonely. There was not a lot of demand for analysis or even reporting on what was happening in Taiwan, let alone within the Taiwan Strait. So I would argue that in the past 8 years or so, and certainly starting with the Taiwan administration, the Taiwan issue, if you will, has become much more internationalized. And there's more and more recognition that whatever happens in Taiwan, whatever happens in the Taiwan Strait, is not an isolated event, but would have repercussions regionally and also globally. We've seen a much larger number of foreign correspondents now being based in Taiwan. Many of those correspondents used to be based in places like Beijing and Shanghai, but thanks to the Chinese Communist Party, a lot of them are now based here in Taiwan. So the nature of the reporting, the quality of the reporting, also has played a role in fostering greater awareness overseas about what's at stake here in Taiwan.
In your experiences or interactions with more foreign media outlets or foreign correspondents, are there key points that they would keep poking at or keep asking?
The key point when it comes to Taiwan is the potential for armed conflict. And this is what makes headlines whenever the People's Liberation Army holds large-scale maneuvers around Taiwan, or Beijing says something dramatic about Taiwan, and then the elections in Taiwan, who will be elected? Does that increase the likelihood or risks of armed conflict in the Taiwan Strait? This is the main focus. What is lacking for a foreign audience is a better understanding a more granular understanding of Taiwanese politics and Taiwanese society. Local perspective, Taiwan is always said that it's a small place. I always argue it has the population of Australia. This is a very, very complex place with a very, very complex historical background as well. Translating that into short news segments for an international audience that probably doesn't know anything about Taiwan is very challenging. But I think that if the international community is to truly understand why the people in Taiwan refuse to be governed by the Chinese Communist Party, you cannot ignore the domestic variables that make this place so complicated.
The younger generation, we talk about Gen Z, they might have less connection with China. How is Taiwan identity being framed now in Taiwan?
It's a very important issue. We have seen a shift over the years with new generations of Taiwanese. Their only experience is living under a democratic system. maybe Akong Ama, grandparents, perhaps parents were born in China, that generation, those generations may have had a greater attachment to what is now the People's Republic of China. But for newer generations, Taiwan is their home, right? Another area that I think is very important to understand is oftentimes headlines in newspapers will say pro-independence DPP, pro-unification Kuomintang, KMT. Again, there's a lot of nuance in those questions as well, and I think one of the main discoveries that I've made over the years, and something I'm quite proud of by virtue of interacting with a lot of people within the blue camp, is the fact that, yes, there is a small percentage of people in Taiwan who are pro-unification in the single-digit numbers. Within that small group, there is a sizable number of people who said yes, but only at a point when the People's Republic of China has democratized, which will not happen anytime soon with the kind of leadership that exists in Beijing right now. Within the blue camp, the majority of people are also pro-independence from the People's Republic of China. So that is the Huadu crowd. These are individuals who may be opposed to a declaration of Taiwan independence, but are very much in favor of defending the Republic of China and what it stands for today, which is a democracy, which is very, very markedly in contrast with the People's Republic of China. So I would say that in terms of identity now, the lines are very blurred. This is more a form of civic nationalism that is based upon values. It seems that the two sides are unable to talk to each other. But there's a lot of overlapping interests that if the two sides could work in tandem, would create a formidable defense against Chinese designs upon Taiwan.
That was a very interesting point that you make. Just to be more like able to let our audience, international audience, to visualize what the current KMT DPP party is like on a spectrum. So for, like you mentioned, for the KMT, there are maybe a little bit that's pro unification, and now there's a bit that's pro the Huadu that you mentioned. What about in the DPP camp? What are they right now?
Right, well, there's also variation within the DPP, the Green camp. There's the deep Greens that are very much in favor of a declaration of independence for a Republic of Taiwan. I would argue that that group constitutes a small number of individuals. They tend to be a bit older as well. Whereas the majority of people in the Green camp, certainly those who supported the policies of former President Tsai Ing-wen, are very much, for the time being, supporting the status quo. And that is where you have the overlap with the people in the blue camp, in the KMT, who also want the defense of the Republic of China. And if you pay attention to the language that former President Tsai was using, she used the term Taiwan and Republic of China interchangeably, and sometimes used the two terms in the same designation, Taiwan ROC.
Just to follow up on the response that you gave, we also saw that President Lai Ching-te recently came back from Eswatini. What kind of message is he sending?
President Lai has a different style than Tsai Ing-wen. President Tsai was a bit more careful. She paid very close attention to the language that she used in her official speeches to not say anything that would potentially cause instability in the Taiwan Strait. President Lai tends to be a bit more combative. Perhaps he feels compelled to appeal a little bit more to the deeper Green crowd within the DPP. But if you listen to his official pronouncements since he became president, he very much hews to what his predecessor was saying in terms of cross-strait relations, Republic of China, and all that. Now we're in a phase where Beijing seems to be acting in ways that further constrain Taiwan's international space. We're seeing that with the developments surrounding President Lai's visit to Eswatini. There's a number of international allies who are complaining to ICAO, saying that the restriction of airspace goes against international law and civil aviation regulations. President Lai, as I said, loves a cockfight, a little bit more combative, and he found a very asymmetrical, creative way of going to Eswatini and basically sticking it to Beijing. What will be a big question is whether China will resort to similar tactics the next time that President Lai wants to visit an official diplomatic ally, very likely in Latin or Central America.
In your book, you actually touched on Chinese President Xi Jinping's kind of leadership style and then compare him to Mao Zedong. Do you observe of his current leadership style any changes that you've seen?
First of all, I have to admit, nobody can presume to be in Xi Jinping's head. We don't know what he's thinking, but what we can do is look at trends in his decision-making, the things that he says officially in his pronouncements and Xi Jinping thought on different issues. What we're facing now is the strongest leader in China since Mao Zedong. What we're facing now is an ultra-personalistic authoritarian leader who has surrounded himself with a very, very small number of advisors who probably do not feel comfortable contradicting him. And we've seen with the removal of a number of Chinese generals and members of the Central Military Commission in recent months. The danger in this, and we saw that with the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, is that this type of leadership, given the near impossibility of them getting the information that they need to make the right decisions, can one day decide to embark on a military operation with the belief that this is going to be at low cost and will be resolved quickly. So now that is not to say that a leader like Vladimir Putin making the, doing the unthinkable is necessarily an indication that Xi Jinping would do the same thing. These are still different leaders, the contexts are different, but all that to say that for Taiwan to ensure its survival, or Republic of China or Taiwan, you cannot assume that China will not one day do the unthinkable. You have to be ready for that contingency, and that means continuing to bolster your deterrence, which increases the likelihood that leadership in Beijing will calculate the costs and benefits and decide that the time is not right, that it will be too costly. But if they go that extra step and still make that difference, you need to promise that that would come at an immense cost. That means investment in military, but also much greater civilian preparedness.
Do you think Taiwan is prepared for whatever situation that might happen, physically and mentally?
Well, the definition of military victory in Taiwan has shifted over the years as well. It became very clear now that the difference in defense spending is China spends officially at least 16 times more than Taiwan on defense. You cannot compete boat against boat, plane against plane, soldier against soldier. The key aim of the Taiwanese military and that of its allies is to increase deterrence, and that is through the acquisition of different weapon systems, a shift to what is called counter-force defense posture in that. So you see much greater investment in land attack cruise missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, and extension of the range of those missile systems as well.
So that comes to my final question for today's interview. We know that this book will have a Mandarin version by the end of this year. What is the key message that you might want to send to the Taiwanese audience compared to your previous books?
This one is a little bit more aimed at the general audience, but I would argue it was the first book in English and probably in Chinese to make a direct link between developments in Ukraine and the defense of Taiwan, and identifying the areas where asking questions, why did deterrence fail in Ukraine? Why did Russia make the decision to invade Ukraine? What other things could the international community have done to further complicate Vladimir Putin's ability to make that kind of decision? It's difficult to imagine that Xi Jinping and the CCP would not feel emboldened and perhaps then decide that Taiwan is next in the list of targets for the authoritarian resurgence that we've been living with in recent years.
Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and then share more about your book.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for having me on the show.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. What are your thoughts after hearing today's conversation with Michael? Or maybe if you have anything about the US-Taiwan-China relations, leave a comment below and let us know. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We hope you enjoyed the show. Until next time.